Vinayak Pai, currently leading Tata Projects Limited, brings extensive experience and expertise. Previously, as Global Group President for Worley, he oversaw energy and chemical services in 49 countries with 30,000 employees, achieving $5 billion in revenue. During COVID, he successfully led the EMEA APAC division, improving revenue and margins. Before Worley, Mr. Pai was president of Jacobs Global Energy Chemicals and Resources business, excelling in over 25 countries with 25,000 employees and a $5 billion in revenues. He began his career at Acre Solutions, rising to director operations in his 25-year tenure. Educationally accomplished, he holds a bachelor's in electrical engineering, a postgraduate in management from Symbiosis, and an executive MBA from IIT Bombay's Shailesh J. Mehta School of Management. Vinayak actively participates in industry forums, serving as a speaker and panelist. He is a member of Executive Leader World 50 and was a commissioner at the Energy Transition Commission, UK, involved with Society of Petroleum Engineers and the PPMEI. Committed to sustainability, he leads Tata Projects' Green Thumb initiative. Beyond work, he enjoys sports and prioritizes upskilling Tata Projects' workforce, providing training for unskilled workers to progress in their professions. His dedication to excellence and social responsibility distinguishes him as a prominent industry leader. Thank you, Mr. Pai, for sparing your time today this morning for this interview.
Thank you, Roshan. Glad to be speaking on this subject and to our audience,
Absolutely.
which I think are the future of our nation. So.
Truly, they are. And I'm sure once they watch this interview, they definitely will have a lot to learn from. So, taking you through your journey, sir, can you take us through the highlights of your professional journey from being a trainee engineer at Acre Solutions to your current role as a leader at Tata Projects Limited?
Yeah, I think reflecting on my professional journey, I can say that one of the constant has been learning and change. Yeah? I've kept on learning and I've kept on changing. And I think those are two aspects which eventually, leads you to a path of success.
True.
I have been in the same of my first organization for 25 years, then made a couple of changes. So this is my maybe third major job. So I've typically stayed with the same organization, looked for opportunities within, looked for opportunities to learn. And always taken opportunities which came my way. Many a times, people overthink when they get opportunity, whether, they have the skills, they have the capabilities, whether they will succeed. I think I've learned over a period of time. I did that, first few times when you had to take an assignment out of your comfort zone. But then I soon realized that, if you have the passion and you have a support system in an organization, and you have a good team, all that can be managed.
Well, you just summarized the last 25 years in a few lines. Thank you so much for that. Leading on from there, now, as the Global Group President at Worley, you oversaw operations in 49 countries with a substantial workforce and revenue. I mean, it's no easy task. How did you approach managing such a vast and diverse business landscape?
Typically, I always feel we should prioritize what we can do. I mean, there is sometimes people misunderstand that the higher you are in an organization, the more work you have to do. That's not necessarily so. I think you have to prioritize what essentially needs your inputs and your skill sets, and then delegate the rest. So in my role when I was, looking after a vast business globally, I had 4 or 5 people reporting to him. So I took a lot of care to choose those individuals, a lot of care to, look at the dynamics of the businesses they lead versus their capabilities, and then set clear expectation and then delegate, to them the day-to-day activities, and then focus more on strategic priorities for the future and the risks which the businesses have. So continuously look at evolving risk, how we can take control of the risk on the business on a global scale.
True.
So, when I was in the Netherlands, I would wake up and look at all the news across the world and say, because it gives you an indication that, either oil prices are down or there is a political instability at some place in the world where we have operations. So I would focus more on risk and emerging themes and strategic priorities. 3 years ago, I identified sustainability and digital as two strategic priorities for the organization. So I used to personally drive those priorities because on a day-to-day basis, people are more focused on getting short-term results. So, but as a leader, you have to think long-term.
True. I mean, you've put it so easily, but I'm sure it's easier said than done. I mean, true. Now, you've held a significant leadership position in the energy and chemicals industry, including being the president of the global ECR business at Jacobs. How did you drive growth and success in this role across multiple countries? I mean, that's just way too dynamic.
Yeah. So, again, I think if you look at the whole industry, there are a handful of majors, actually. Right. That whole industry is broken down into some very big national companies and then smaller players. So, when you are running a global business, each of that is important because in some countries there are national players and in some countries there are smaller players, but their business is very good for us. So the way I used to sort of drive is set very clear expectation of what we want to do in a particular period of time. So when I took over as the global president for Jacobs, I had a chat with the CEO and we aligned on two very simple things as what I will deliver for him and for the organization, which was to say that this is a cyclic industry, so we won't focus so much on top line growth at this point in time. We would stabilize the top line growth and improve the bottom line very rapidly in 4 to 6 quarters. So once you have set that very clear expectation, then you look at how can you work with the major players to give you a base load of work, and how can get better profitability by working where we have higher skill sets with smaller players in specific geographies and improve the bottom line. So you actually map that strategy very clearly, get it aligned with the team, and then every player in the team knows their role and what they have to deliver. So and then help them. That's the other thing, we all need help, and there is only so much you can gain by blaming people, but if there is a problem, how do we resolve it? How do we get together to move on from this, learn from this, and then rapidly meet our strategic priorities? So absolutely.
Now, so with a strong educational background, including an executive MBA from IIT Bombay, how has your academic knowledge contributed to your professional success?
I hate to admit it, but I was not a great student in terms of the parameters which are set in the education industry, which is basically grades and marks, right?
True.
So I always think that education comes from everywhere, and most of my education came from the classrooms, but outside the classrooms as well.
Right.
So I think when I was in engineering, I got a lot of, one of the best, the second oldest college in Asia. So, it had a rich history, fantastic curriculum. True. So I did learn the technical part of it, but we also in COAP is the college I come from in Pune. We also had a boat club where, people go to collaborate, gatherings, sports events. True. So as much as you learn inside the classroom, you also, learn outside the classroom. And at that point in time, it doesn't seem like learning because, you're actually out there to have some fun and de-stress yourself.
True.
But it teaches you so much, which you realize later in life when, those aspects of collaboration, inclusion, teamwork, focus on winning, all that actually becomes the leadership skills, which, on top of your technical skills drives success.
True, absolutely. Very well said. Now, being featured on YouTube as a prominent expatriate living in the Netherlands, like you mentioned earlier, Can you share some insights into your international work experiences and how they have shaped your leadership style?
I think, internationally, every country is very different, right, in terms of how their approach to life and business, right? For example, I lived in the US. US companies are known for, and the whole, ecosystem is about results.
True.
Yeah. I mean, quarter on quarter, you have to deliver results. You have to, do everything required to be, result oriented. You can pay as much money as you want to get the results in terms of incentives to the leadership, to people to achieve success. Europe is not very different, but different in a lot of ways. Sustainability is very important. Many countries in Europe actually frown on wealth. They think that a social balance is more important than wealth.
True.
Yeah, welfare of people, work-life balance is on a much higher scale than results. So every country is different, and when you have to run global businesses, you have to understand what works in which geography, and then have your business strategy as well as your people strategy to match that.
True.
But I spent a large part of my career in India, and then I went out. And when I was first asked to go to the US and run the global operations, I was very thoughtful of the fact that I've not done anything like this. But then I took up the challenge. But I realized after I went there and then into Europe, I realized that the skill sets you develop, working and leading businesses in India can match anywhere. Because in India you have the same amount of focus on results. People work very hard, like in the US, but they are also very socially conscious, very family oriented, like in Europe. So, very respectful, learn to balance, very culturally sensitive. So I believe if you actually work in India, it prepares you for much easily for a global role, whereas people, who are either in the US or in Europe or in Australia, when they go global, might not struggle, but might take a little more time to adapt to this.
True. And the whole cultural difference plays a big part in there. True. Okay. Now, you mentioned this earlier quite a few times. Now, your dedication to environmental sustainability is evident through your support for the Green Thumb initiative at Tata Projects. How do you encourage a culture of sustainability within the organization?
See, sustainability is fast becoming a necessity for business. The whole ESG questions which investors, are focusing on, and rightly so, and regulators as well, is actually, very critical for a long-term sustainability of both the business as well as the planet, right? We have to focus on, other than business, what are the critical areas, and sustainability is one of them. Safety, welfare, well-being, mental health of people is another. So these are concepts which you have to put top priority on as a leader, because that is where not willingly or willfully, but in day-to-day pressures, people and leaders tend to ignore that. Right. So unless you put it on top of your agenda and state, so when we restated our vision and mission for Tata Projects, we put sustainability up there, saying sustainability is critical for us as our long-term vision. So you have to actually paint that vision, and then also demonstrate, through personal leadership, personal examples, how you can influence it. And actually set KPIs for the team to deliver sustainability, because unless you measure it, you can't get it, right? So it has to happen culturally as well as, as an imperative, which has, tracking mechanisms to ensure that we actually end up delivering what we say.
True. So it's a continuous effort. It's not a show work that, we are doing into this. So it's true. Now, apart from your professional achievements, your commitment to upskilling the workforce at Tata Projects is, of course, commendable. Could you elaborate on the initiatives you've undertaken to provide training and development opportunities for the unskilled workers?
Yeah. See, we, at any given point in time, we have 10 to 12,000 employees, but we have almost 80,000 people at various sites, right? And they are actually the backbone of our business. And we have to do anything and everything to ensure that backbone stays intact and fit, right? And today the availability of workforce, because of so much of construction activity happening, there is a shortage, right? And as the economy grows, there are other options for people. So very few people choose being at a construction site because they don't find it sustainable enough. And believe me, the youngsters are looking for jobs which are where they want to see things related to sustainability happen. They want to see technology being invested in. So if we have to keep that skill set intact and make them fitter and better, we have to invest in skill development. So we consciously have a program. We have a senior leader who drives skill development. We have a set of trainers. On every quarter, we do this across sites, skill development. So bringing in experts, working with the National Skill Development Council as well as the Construction Skill Development Council of India, to put those programs in place, train workforce from unskilled to skilled and then semi-skilled to higher skill level. So we track both of that so that people find themselves moving and doing better things. Train them in technology, which are used at our construction sites. So that's a continuous process for us. On a quarterly basis, varies between 500 to 1,000 people who get, sort of undergo through this program. I still think it's not enough. We have to do more, but it's a journey.
True. And I believe it's also a pipeline for the future workforce of the company. Absolutely. So it works wonderfully. True. Okay. Now, so as a leader in the infrastructure business, how do you see the industry evolving in the face of changing global dynamics and environmental concerns?
So I think there's a huge amount of action happening in the infrastructure space, and it is unprecedented in India and in many economies. Very rarely have countries spent 8 to 10% of their GDP on infrastructure, and India presently is doing so. So there's huge amount of investments in public infrastructure, in the state governments investing in infrastructure, the central government investing in, and the private sector investing in infrastructure and industrial growth. Right. So all that put together has a very strong base of growth, which is actually driving the Indian economy. One of the key drivers of the Indian economy is this construction, infrastructure, energy industries. So at the same time, it's also rapidly transitioning into a much sustainable energy mix. So that's the other dynamic where renewable power is a huge growth area. The amount of solar power which the country generates, which has investments have been made and actual power is generated in the last 3 to 5 years, is phenomenal, even on a global scale. Right. So we have almost a third of India's power coming from renewable sources now, which is most of the countries, even China, US, they're all far behind. Third, they are somewhere in the 10 to 20% range. So there's a lot of change happening in the energy mix in the industry. There's a lot of investment happening in infrastructure in India at this point in time. And I see this to be very sustainable, and which will actually lead to India being the manufacturing hub in future. So India started as a agricultural economy and jumped into a services economy, missing a step of the manufacturing economy. And now the next driver of growth is the manufacturing economy, which the energy and industrial business as well as the infrastructure business, better infrastructure makes manufacturing more efficient and more viable. So on a global scale, India is now competing as one of the top manufacturing destinations, which I think over the next couple of decades and the energy transition will transform the whole industrial landscape in India.
Absolutely. So it's definitely a great time to be in India.
Yes.
True. Now, can you share an instance where you had to make a tough decision as a leader, and how did you navigate through that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to make a lot of tough decisions because if you have to also put the organizations and the shareholders' interests, at the top, because finally your shareholder trusts you to take decisions which will maximize returns for the company and for the shareholders, which is how businesses have to think. So in that process, we have to take tough decisions. Now, these tough decisions is across a spectrum, because you have to sometimes take tough decisions with respect to the workforce, where there are performance related issues. You have to take tough decisions where it's not easy because you're affecting lives of people. But you also have to take tough decisions in terms of business, right? Absolutely. And you have to take tough decisions with your customers where your interests and their interests are not aligning. And those are probably the tougher decisions where you have to go and tell a customer we would not be continuing working with you. So now that takes a lot of courage because it's not easy. So
and it's loss of business.
It's loss of business, but then you have to balance it. Because things happen in business, which again the risks you have to navigate, identify, and be prepared for it. But at the same time, I think all this has to be done. I always found that it's much easier when the tough decisions you make are very transparent, are for the right reasons, and you're upfront and discuss it without emotions. And explain why a certain, to take a decision is not for the other person or a company not to understand why you are taking a decision is always where it goes wrong. If they really understand why you are taking a decision and what led you to take this decision and have a good faith conversation, things become always easy.
Yeah, but it's always difficult to leave the emotions out of the decision for both the parties.
Yes, so but when you have that. When you are taking that tough decision, you should always understand the impact it is having on the person, because even finally you are affecting the well-being, livelihood of a family, right? So you need to see the impact. Many a times, when you put yourself in that, the decision need not change, but how you do that and a follow-up of that decision can always be managed much effectively.
True, absolutely. The last question in this section. Now, as you look back on your career, and you've had an extensive career, what advice would you give to the aspiring professionals who aim to achieve leadership roles in this business, or for that matter, in any other business? Right. So, what would your advice be?
See, first is the question itself. Aspiring to be in leadership. I think leadership has to come as a consequence of your capabilities. The aspiration is there. So, if you leave it, I don't think if you ask me, I ever, at the beginning of my career, aspired that I will be a CEO or, I'll be running a global business. I didn't, right? But it happened as a consequence of the capabilities I developed and the opportunities I got along the way, right? So I would say people have to be open around that and not focus only on the result that, I need a promotion or I need to be here, right? But at the same time, my suggestion is be curious about what you are doing and be passionate about what you are doing. I think these two things are extremely critical. Because if you are, curious about what's happening, you won't limit yourself to what you are doing. So your maximum learning happens when you understand how the whole thing works together rather than one part of your function, right? So be curious about what's happening around you, collaborate, teamwork, go to people, ask questions, give them suggestions, you'll learn more. What skills you need to add. So, be passionate about what's the next step. What do I need to learn to get to the next step? Not that, I want to get to the next step. What should I do which will help me to get to the next step? So, do that planning, right? And lastly, I always, feel that we should always trust ourselves and our capabilities. Many a times, the box we put around ourselves is a much bigger challenge than any external circumstances. So, we should trust our capabilities, work on them, upskill ourselves, and then keep taking opportunities as they come.
True. Very well spoken. Thank you so much for sharing that piece of advice.